I'm very litigious, so don't humiliate me.
Yeah.
My goodness, there is.
All right, that's fine. I was told to warn people ahead. Okay, I'm sorry, Jeff, let's begin.
Okay, so I just as employee by rate of reduction, my name is Jeffrey Escobar. I am a REWA representative and also I sit on Community Board 8. And we have been meeting throughout the last year or so concerning developments that have been occurring. And one of the biggest considerations that I have been working towards is getting the community at large, number one, ready for or engaging in a community benefit agreement, and then also number two, getting them ready for entering into the ULIP process with the city. And for those who missed the presentation that happened in May or June, ULIP is the Uniform Land Use Review Procedure that all major projects are required to go through the city. Why I asked for the meeting is because I think that for a while we thought we had some length of time before the ULIP process would begin, and we were recently notified by way of the community board meeting 2 weeks ago that Cornell is required by their agreement with the EDC to file by November 10th their ULIP application. Now, the ULIP application necessarily involves a number of things, which I think Sharon and Pope have raised in the previous meeting. Number one, some of the reports that they submitted. For example, the city environmental quality report is actually submitted at that point. Transportation studies, infrastructure studies that Cornell has prepared will be submitted at that point. All of the intrinsic well-to-dos of what they intend to do and what studies they've done to accommodate the project will be submitted and will be reviewed by the community board. The community board, and this is what this chart gives you, is it kind of gives you the process of what happens. It's basically built in so that it's about a year-long process in which the community board is the first gauntlet it has to go through. Within 60 days of receipt of the full filing of the application, the community board has to either recommend approval with comments, disapprove approval, or disapprove comment with comments. Now, as it pertains to what we do here, I think that, and it's always been my position, is that it is the first volleying point that you really have as a community to make it known whether or not, for example, if we do have a community benefit agreement that's being established or in place or being negotiated, if in fact there is a coalition of community members that is advocating for the community at large, it should be put on the record. Because this is a statutory process, all the comments are recorded and it's required by the public meetings law to be memorialized and entered and to be considered as it goes through the process. But anyways, just to kind of go through before we talk about any of that, some notes that I have is that they have to file by November 10th, Cornell does, or they pay a penalty of $1,000 a day for the first 60 days, and then for every additional day thereafter, they'll face $1,000 every 2 months. So first 60 days, they pay $1,000 for every day they're late. Every 60 days thereafter, that increases by another $1,000 per day. They are being required under the agreement with the EDC right now. Well, let me opt out that the agreement with the EDC is they've already paid $5 million up front in pre-development fees and deposited out with the city. And they've also paid a $5 million security deposit for development purposes. This is all just by way of information so everyone understands what's going on here. Phase 1, which is schematics, floor plans, and drawings, and cost estimates have to be submitted to the EDC by 2016. They will have a liquidated damages of $1 million if they fail to submit that on time. The phase 1 is to be completed by 2017. That's going to be 200,000 square feet of space. They're to commence phase 2 in 2024, which is 1 million square feet, to be completed by 2027. And the total project will be 2 million square feet to commence in 2034 and complete by 2037. So as you can see, this is an immense project. The one thing to remember is as it relates to the community benefit agreement, if we, as we go forward with this, is that you want to have any type of agreement in place with the city or with Cornell at this stage, unfortunately, long before phase 2, phase 3 begins. So that's why time is of the essence, and it's a little unfortunate because they have to submit by November 10th this year. What has happened at Community Board 8 is that
Did you just say that you want to have the community benefit agreement in place by November 10th?
You want to have it at least established that we have won the negotiations and that it can be put on the record throughout the entire ULO process.
Okay.
So
just want to make sure I heard that right.
Right. I mean, we should, and this is what we're going to be talking about tonight is, the timeline for the coalition development, the timeline for actually establishing the working group. It really needs to, and then serious talks with Cornell really needs, or like at least the primary stages of serious talks should really be in place by the time the by the November date rolls around, because at that point, this will go into further the comments concerning the community board, is that the community board takes it very seriously in its recommendations to the borough president, to the council, to the city, whether or not there is community, if there's an agreement in place, whether Cornell has been working towards it, how receptive they've been, how not receptive they've been, whether or not they should be taking those into consideration, whether or not there should be disapproval based upon that. I guess my whole point is that if we take our time in this and don't have something in place, and have a working group in place by that time, or have open dialogue with Cornell, I think that you are going to the ship will have started to sail.
We will have lost the
It'll
opportunity.
be hard to drop off. Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure that's what you said.
Yeah. Thank you. So with the community board, what's ended up happening is that for this last winter, I myself and Ellen Pollaby, who also sits in community board 8, we've been working with the new chair who was voted in, Nick Weiss, basically telling him that our community doesn't want. We know that's going to undergo ULURP. We don't want it to see it get rubbed out necessarily, because the ULURP process gets steamrolled and begins. And oftentimes when things come before community board, the community comes only together at the last minute, and then they kind of say, well, you have not great opportunity.
So could you also remind us who the other members from Roosevelt Island for the community board? Because I think it was recently.
I was the recent change. Sharon Pope stepped down, and
she stepped down.
Yeah, and I actually was the person that took her place. So.
Okay, and is Deidre still on? Deidre Breslin?
I would have to. Yeah, she is.
Patrick Stewart is.
Patrick Stewart is, Rick Parness, and then Ellen Pollaby, myself.
Larry Parness.
Yeah.
And there was mention on the blog, though, in reference to Patrick, it said something about previous Roosevelt Island.
He represented me that he no longer lived on Roosevelt Island. But I don't know if that's the case, and I think that's probably where just my comment come from. He chaired.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
Okay,
Right.
I'm just trying to confirm that.
Because he had, the reason, and this is why it's also, backtrack a little bit, is it's also a concern of why Larry, Ellen, and I come aboard, because Patrick chairs the committee, Roosevelt Island Committee and subcommittee. And we hadn't known, and when he first introduced himself to me in my appointment back in last year, he basically said, I'm former resident of the island, I chair the committee, but I have the interests involved. It became a bigger concern when he raised his hand during the general board meeting and said, well, why are we even concerned about this? Isn't all of that property belong to the state, the state leasehold? So it just, he was a little bit remotely out of touch with what's going on the island at this point, and kind of.
A little more than remotely.
That land is
I
don't
not
think it's
state
been well
land.
lately, so maybe.
There's
It's very much out.
Could we do a little online research?
Yeah.
Figure that out. I'll give him a phone call.
Regardless, he's still sitting on. So going back to the task force, he still sits on this task force. So what Community Board did is that instead of having Roosevelt Island subcommittee kind of steer the whole process, which understandable because the whole point of why the community boards were established is that they actually are in charge of dealing with all ULIP applications by and large. And because we've had a lot of strong talkings by Jessica Lappin's office, Mike Kellner's office, everybody from the state down about how important this project is, they basically have seen it as the project is going to undergo very close scrutiny. And not just for the interests of Roosevelt Island itself, but also the interests of the community at large as it sits in New York City. And so what ended up happening is that Nick, who is, if you ever get a chance to attend any of our meetings, very good chair, he decided that he's going to chair the task force. And he asked 15 or so members of the community board to sit on it. And those 15 members consist of all the chairs of the environmental subcommittee, because there are a lot of environmental issues, and they obviously will be the one reviewing the environmental reports. The education committee, because of the planned school on the island that Cornell is planning to introduce. Transportation and infrastructure, because the city's buses and also the other side of the island and subway lines are all going to be severely impacted. And the zoning development subcommittee, who basically deals with all zoning development issues, and which I also sit on. And then all members of the Roosevelt Island subcommittee. So in total, you've got about 15 members. Very well, as I've said in the blog, I have full confidence in, because I know that number of them and their appointments to the community board in general because of their expertise in engineering, architecture, land use development, whatnot. And so they are going to look at it at a very close scrutiny eye, as objectively as possible, in my opinion. The one component, of course, that is the Roosevelt Island appointees, and also what we turn to the community for, and what hopefully any kind of community benefit agreement would symbolize, is a singular document or voice saying what the interests are of the community and what we're looking for, and what we're asking Cornell for a good neighbor status. Then with going back to this task force, what's going to end up happening, at least from my understanding, is that Nick has asked that, they first, number one, Cornell, well, I guess I'll just share a few things. I mean, the concern that has been raised is that, Cornell has been doing a lot of individual meetings with individual select members of the community board. For example, they went to Nick and said, hey, we're going to be filing an application. What can you do for us? And this kind of thing. And Nick basically said, I will convene a huge task force and demand that you go to Roosevelt Island, and the community board 8 will hold a public town hall, and you need to give a formal presentation of your intents. So we're dealing with a lot of back and forths with Cornell, trying to figure out what they should do and who they should be talking to, and using whatever advantage they can to do so. The community board 8 has said to me and to Ellen, both privately, that they understand the interests of the island at large, and that's the biggest concern. And that I think that, at least in my opinion, they're very welcoming of any type of benefit agreement that may be in place, because it answers the community component that so oftentimes they have to subject their own judgment on. So, because oftentimes things will come before us and we have no idea whether the community really cares about whether or not there's a curb line cut here, or if there's a bus stop here. Obviously, if we have a working document in place, they can point to it and say, well, we will approve it with the caveat of whichever. And so, in any case, I just wanted to, so I guess in closing, the whole point of the meeting is, number one, I wanted to point out where we're moving on with the community board, that it's advancing, and that by all means reassure everyone here in the community that everybody is not looking to insert any type of community coalitions of any sort, that actually we're just trying to do our job of the review and engineering process and what we need to do for development. But then number two, get everyone on board and understand that the process will begin in November this year, so not late, and that just creates the stronger reason why the coalition building needs to happen as soon as possible. And I think Jonathan will speak to that proceeding. And my advice at this point, and I think I've voiced it to a couple of people I've talked to here on the subcommittee, is that that the community coalition outreach should be initiated immediately. My proposal has been that we have a working series of 4 continuous weeks of community outreach, basically having a town hall meeting of all the coalition community groups saying we're going to meet on this date, come find out what's going on, find out what we're proposing for a community benefit agreement and coalition. You need to have your name, contact information, do you want to participate in that kind of thing.
This is a town meeting separate from the one that CBA is
Yes,
talking
right.
about.
This would be our sponsor. Yeah.
Okay. Just wanna make
It'd be sponsored by us, the steering committee, and we would just look to hammer away and making sure that there's public awareness, and because I think what we really want to do is create the message that there is a sifting process that's going to be here, that's in place to build what the community wants, and that both the local community at large and also Cornell needs to, instead of poking around and trying to find the most advantageous spot, deal directly with the steering committee that is, that's going to be in charge of the process for the community voices, number one, and know that the greater elected groups, RERA, Community Board 8, the stakeholders, they all are on board and know that that's who we're really going through. So far, Community Board 8 has seemed to agree with that, and we've been doing. I think we've been doing a good job of steering them and keeping that in their minds. But I just want to make sure that we're solidified in 2 months, because that's really when it's the best, most opportune time. So that's my spiel.
Thank you so much. Now we have questions and answers. Please raise your hand because I want to stack so everybody will get a chance. Anybody have any questions? Or Margie, anybody else want to ask a question?
Me.
Okay, Rick. Okay, Vicki. Okay. All right, go ahead, Margie.
How does this fit in with the secret process? Does that go concurrently, or is
Goes
the
concurrently.
CBA running that also?
No,
or not?
it's not, because it's state.
It's a state thing,
Right,
but they
that's-
don't.
Right, everything Rick's blog actually did a good job distinguishing.
Wait, don't speak in abbreviations for some of us who may not know.
Oh,
So
okay.
could you talk
So
about-
there's seeker and secra, or whatever. There's the city environmental quality review
Right.
process for the city-owned property and leased property that they have to go undergo the environmental reviews. And then there's the state, because there is a part of the project, as some of the reports have accurately pointed out, there are carve-outs of the project property-wise that sit on state property that is not leased, that is not city-owned, or leased to the city or whatever. And so ultimately what's sad is that they all kind of overlap because the
Yeah,
property is
that's why I would
contiguous.
see the two of them be done together.
Right, but it's, most of the time, oftentimes they'll probably just submit both reports,
Oh,
and then they'll say, this is the state property, this is the city property, this is where it is, so they can see the bigger picture. But kind of happens at the same time, it's just the city's not, the community board is not.
Not involved in secret at all.
Yeah, they'll ask to see it.
Yeah.
They will ask to see it, but they won't necessarily hold that as what's being submitted for their review.
And if we assume the worst case scenario, and the city does the ULAR process and they decide that this is not a good fit for Roosevelt Island, what kind of authority do they have to say, don't do it? I mean, is this a go or no-go decision, or is this just an input kind of thing?
Yeah, well, so what ends up happening, so they give the approval or disapproval, and it goes to, you kind of get like a checkbox process.
Right.
So the community board checks it off and says, oh, okay, let's say disapproval, or disapproves. It goes to the community, it goes to the borough president's office. The borough president has to recommend what the community board says. So, I mean, he's going to review it,
Okay.
but if the community board says no, Scott is going to have a huge issue.
And who does he recommend it to, and whose final decision?
He reviews it to the board of borough presidents, who just basically enter on the record, because they submit that for overall record to the community, the community planning committee, city planning, sorry. I know, there's so many initials. And so and then in that process, they actually, I can tell you from dealing with the CPC that community considerations is a huge part for them. I mean, developers really want a clean yes all the way through. And so if they get a no anywhere in the process, they will withdraw that. Most developers, most level-minded developers who want to get approval will withdraw and start the process all over again. If, let's say, again, continue the approval, the whole process that be disapproved, CPC will then most likely disapprove as well. And then it moves on to, what do I have here? Yeah, the city council, that's right.
CPC
Yeah.
is,
City planning.
City Planning Commission.
oh, sorry.
And you basically get council review. I mean, the council, it will automatically be reviewed if they get 3 no's, basically, or disapprovals, which the borough president's office, the community board, and the community planning, or the city planning commission. And then you go to the city council before it goes to the mayor. And most likely, at that point, quite frankly, if everybody's saying no, we're saying no, and this is where the whole coalition committee in, because Jessica Lappin she wants this here, but she also, and Mike Kellner both really want this project here, but they also don't want the community, who their constituents are, they're going to be, very much.
I guess the end of my question is, can Bloomberg just say, I want to do this?
No, ultimately can't. Because it goes
Council
back.
has to approve it.
Right, and he can try, but that's why this is what's great about this, why it's been built, is that it's by the public meetings law, all of this has to be on the public record.
Right.
And so if that were to happen, again, and this actually goes very key to part of the coalition, is that if that were to happen and he were to say, I don't care, you're building it, you would actually have the community coalition would have standing to initiate an Article 78 proceeding to enjoin him from proceeding. That's basically, again, another kind of mechanism of why I think this is a very good idea to build this kind of coalition, because it really does gives you the legal standing that you need as a community to say, no, we don't want that, and you are outside it. Because then what the law says is, ultimately the mayor's decision can't be arbitrary and capricious. If there's an overwhelming disapproval by the community, it's by all means an arbitrary and capricious. And I don't think the city doesn't want to be on the record doing that. None of the elected representatives. And although Mayor Bloomberg is not necessarily going to, he's not going to be reelected. He's out of his term. The person who's coming in, that's going to dictate if they're.
That hasn't stopped him before.
Right.
And then is the.
Wait, I'm sorry. I am stacked. Rick? I'm sorry, Rick?
Is there a history that you're aware of Cornell working with community groups on the east side and with Community Board 8? And if so, what is their reputation?
Yes, there is. I mean, obviously the Whale and Cornell and all the hospital being built. The reputation they have not had to deal with such if we provided that we get this coalition built, an organized effort. They've had to deal with individual block organizations, and they have been open to that. I mean, they haven't. If I were to compare the two, and I guess this is in my opinion. I'm going to put that in caveat. In my opinion, there are other organizations. And there's an ongoing project right now that's looking to put itself on York Avenue. That would rather bulldoze their way through and say we have them as a matter of right to build, and we really don't care what you say as a neighbor. Cornell has, because of their chartered responsibilities to the community, to the local communities, and their public use land use doctrine and whatnot, they actually have an obligation to, in good faith, negotiate with communities. It seems to me that they have. I mean, they have dealt with the aesthetic issues, soundproofing issues, all construction-related issues. But this is the first that they're looking to fully integrate themselves into a community, in my opinion, versus already just joining up another community that's there. So I would say that this type of project is, at least with the Upper East Side, is probably the first time that we really have to deal with so many groups and so many community issues. And that's why the help consultant that they've hired for the project.
Thank you.
Vicki?
Actually-
2 questions.